Chapter 4 The Science of Magic. In Red's regimented and monotonous schedule as the daughter of the Queen of Hearts, there was one particular spot of brightness which ironically ran contrary to what might be seen as rebellious: school. And in Wonderland, school was in session most days, even most holidays. Maybe they would have a day off tomorrow or a day off yesterday, but never a day off today. Wonderland High was just as tightly run and orderly as anywhere else within the Queen's domain, but at least here the high uniform windows let in plenty of sunlight. The school was housed in an old manor near the Duchess's mansion and Hatter House. It was far enough from home to afford Red a pleasant walk every day, despite the occasional squawking of the mome raths. And Red's favorite class at Wonderland High, by far, was science. For its rules, though just as strict and inflexible as her mother's, at least made sense. When the Queen of Hearts stubbed her toe, she might outlaw raincoats. If a servant spilled her soup, the Queen could demand that nobody say the word Tuesday ever again. But if Red held a tart in midair and dropped it, it would fall to the ground, no matter what. An immovable marble statue would stop to a rolling hedgehog every time. There was something very soothing about these laws that did not follow Red's mother's logic, but the irrefutable, irrational of the universe instead. Red was still a bit distracted when she walked into class that morning, wondering how she might go about being more rebellious. It wasn't until she nearly bumped into her teacher that she came back to her senses. "Princess," said Mr. Hatter, chuckling and sidestepping her, "we have our head in the tum-tum tree again, haven't we?" Mr. Hatter, who preferred to drop the formality and go simply by Maddox, cut a striking figure in his Maddox plaid-top hat, purple hair, and olive green leather trench coat, worn on top of a pin-striped wool suit. He was the epitome of dapper. None other than the Mad Hatter's son himself, Maddox had chosen a more academic route over millinery and was now the most popular teacher at school. Unlike his father, he was grounded, thoughtful, and caring. He was known throughout Wonderland High for his outlandish experiments, such as constructing a tiny hot air balloon for the first-year class's pet Barugov and soaking a portrait of the Queen of Hearts in a chemical compound so they could set it on fire without damaging it. The rumors were never confirmed, but Red was pretty sure he'd been put on temporary leave for that last one. "Sorry, Maddox," Red shook her head and backed up. "I've just been distracted." Maddox leaned theatrically on his desk as the other students filed into class. Perhaps it was his outlandish nature, but he was less afraid of Red than the other teachers were. Maybe that was one reason Red liked him so much. "Is anything the matter?" "No." Then Red reconsidered. "Well, you'll hear soon enough. I'm to give the royal decree at this year's tea ceremony." Maddox clapped. "Oh, how fabulous! I was just telling the Tweedles that we could use more voices in leadership." His eyes grew wide and solemn. "I mean, of course, in addition to your lovely mother." Red smiled. "Of course." Maddox was also one of the few who let a critique of her mother slip once in a while, and Red found it refreshing. "But only 2 weeks, Maddox. That's very quick." "Nonsense," the teacher scoffed. "All my colleagues here are very confident in your ability, as am I. I am sure that in no time you will find your feet, but for now you may begin by finding your seat." Red smirked and took the cue to settle into her desk. "Yes, hello everyone," Maddox called out to the room. "Good day, and what a delightful one it is, for we are going to continue our lessons in physics. Now I know," he held up his hands as if expecting a groan, but no one in the classroom made a peep. They all sat attentive and still in their chairs, just as they'd been taught. A step out of line meant writing the Queen's mission statement by hand 100 times, which left students so muddled that they couldn't think straight for days. I know it is difficult material, but I will try my best to make it engaging. Maddox paused, doffing his top hat and shaking his purple hair. Now, wait a minute. There was something else I was supposed to do. What was it? Red glanced in the corner next to the chalkboard and nearly jumped out of her seat. There was a boy there, tall and lanky with a mop of brown hair and the widest grin she'd ever seen. Sure, Red had been distracted when she came into the classroom, but felt certain he hadn't been there before. Maddox seemed to catch sight of the newcomer at the same time Red did. "Oh," the teacher exclaimed, "I didn't see you there, young man. Come over here where we can see you." The boy slunk toward the front of the classroom with his hands in his pockets, the same sly cat-like smile on his face. "Ah, yes," Maddox said. "Everyone, this is Chester, a new student at Wonderland High. I trust you'll all give him a hearty welcome." At the teacher's nod, the class broke into polite applause. Red followed suit, noting with curiosity the air that Chester had about him. He slouched. He smirked at Maddox's broad gesticulations. These weren't things a typical well-behaved teenager of Wonderland would do. "Now let's see," Maddox continued. "Red, would you mind being Chester's lab partner today and showing him around?" "Yes, just take a seat over there, Chester. She's the girl. I think I can guess," Chester said, nodding at the bright red of Red's hair. "Unless I'm mistaken and your name is, what, Blue?" A surprised snort sounded from one of the students, and it was quickly stifled. Red's eyebrows shot up as Chester took a seat. Then, in spite of herself, she laughed. "Would you believe if I told you my mother was considering the name Alice?" "Absolutely not," Chester said. All right, Maddox said. "Now let's turn your attention to the physics of changing size." As good a teacher as Maddox was, his warning rang true. The lesson was difficult. Red hardly had time to notice the new kid sitting next to her with all the focus she needed to keep up with the theories of how to make things giant or minuscule. In the last quarter hour of class, Maddox handed out worksheets for each pair to muddle through together. "Phew," Chester said, bringing the paper closer and then farther away from his face as if he was trying to get his eyes to focus. "This is a bit more intensive than my usual studies." "Yeah?" Red said. She eyed him with interest, but didn't want to appear overly invested. "Where did you go before Wonderland High?" "Homeschooled," Chester grinned. "We used to be over in the Caterpillar Bush, but we just moved here because my dad was transferred to Kingdom Work. Thought I'd give this place a try." "That's pretty far, all the way on the other side of Wonderland." Red guessed that Chester's move must have been for official business, for while the Queen ruled all of Wonderland with an iron fist, her domain near the castle was the capital of the kingdom and heavily regulated. Travel between the various regions of Wonderland was discouraged, and guards patrolled the capital borders day and night to discern the business of anyone coming in or out. The boy nodded. "Sometimes I forget how big Wonderland is, since I haven't gotten to see very much of it. We had to get written permission and everything. I was curious to see whether things were any different over here, but it seems not." Red wrote in "Drink me" for one of the answers and wondered if she caught his drift. "Different how?" Chester shrugged. "Our town was run like clockwork. Everyone up at the same time each morning, everyone with their designed roles and performing them without question. But I guess—" He glanced around the classroom, which was quiet save for the furious scribbling of pencils and the strained murmurs of each partner pair. Red sensed that, while Maddox's class was a student favorite, the material also frustrated her peers to no end. A perfect grade was often impossible, with assignments designed to encourage trial and error over note memorization. The subject of science itself, in fact, was a messy and imperfect one, but Wonderland kids were taught never to make mistakes. The Queen of Hearts' reign extended well past the Caterpillar's Bush, and Red didn't want to make Chester feel foolish by asking why he thought moving closer to the capital would make things any better. So instead she said, What was your role? He grinned, and his chestnut-colored hair flopped back into his eyes. Never really found mine, he said. That was part of the problem. I didn't want to limit myself to one thing. I liked exploring around town, roaming through the woods. Folks found that very peculiar. My parents got it. They grew up on the northern edge of the kingdom, near Bramble Bay. Things are different up there. Red frowned. Different how? Chester glanced at her for a moment, then looked back down at their worksheet. Just different. I only know what they told me, he shrugged. But anyway, the caterpillar folks never liked us too much. Red watched him carefully, wondering if there was something he was holding back. But at last she said, That's unfortunate. Unfortunate that they didn't like me or that I couldn't find my role. Both, I guess. Everyone has a purpose to serve. And what's yours then, Red Scare? Chester said with some indignation. Red's fingers tightened in a fist around a pencil. Well, for starters, I'm the Queen's daughter. That's fortunate. Chester finished off their worksheet with a flourish, scrawling "Eat me" under the question that had been stumping Red about how a cookie could change someone's size. I'm glad you found a path that suits you so well. Red opened her mouth, but before she could respond, Maddox clapped again. I'm afraid that's our time, the teacher said. Worksheets, pass them forward. Now you'll be seeing your lab partners again soon, so I want you to complete your homework together. Conduct 3 magical experiments and compare them to scientific theories we've discussed in class. Ask yourself the age-old questions. Is magic the same as science? Do they refute one another? Does a correct answer even exist? He chuckled. Don't worry, I won't grade too hard. Or I will. Oh well. Red reached for her book bag and then turned to have the last word with Chester, but she startled when she found the boy was already gone.